I always had a special bond with my grandmother, Elaine. She raised me when my parents chose their careers over being parents. When she passed, I discovered she left me her entire estate worth $3.75 million. My long-absent parents suddenly appeared, acting like they owned everything. At the will reading, they made plans for their money until the judge revealed grandmother's true intentions. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever dealt with entitled family members. This is how justice was served in my family. Growing up, my grandmother Elaine was my world. She took me in when I was just 7 years old, after my parents, Thomas and Julia Burton, decided their ambitious careers were more important than raising their only child. I still remember the day they dropped me off at her modest 2-bedroom home in Rochester, Minnesota. It was supposed to be temporary, just for a few months, while they established themselves in the international business scene. Those months turned into years, and eventually they stopped even pretending they would come back for me. My father worked as an investment banker, always chasing the next big deal across Europe and Asia. My mother accompanied him as his partner in life, and business, as she liked to call herself, though her main occupation seemed to be posting glamorous photos from exotic locations. They would send occasional postcards and make rare phone calls on holidays, always with promises to visit that never materialized. Grandma Elaine never spoke ill of them in front of me, though I sometimes caught a flicker of disappointment in her eyes when another birthday passed without them. "Family is about who shows up, Burton," she would tell me, while baking her famous apple pie in her tiny kitchen. "Not about who shares your blood." Her home may not have been fancy, but it was filled with love. The walls were adorned with my school photos and artwork. She never missed a single soccer game or school event. Every Sunday, we had our special tradition, homemade pancakes shaped like animals, while she told me stories about her youth. She taught me to fish at the nearby lake, helped me with my science projects, and stayed up late explaining algebra when I struggled. My grandmother worked as a high school librarian until her retirement. She lived modestly, clipping coupons and shopping sales. Waste, not want. Not was one of her many sayings that became ingrained in me. I never suspected she had any significant wealth. She drove the same reliable Oldsmobile for 20 years and mended her clothes rather than buying new ones. When college came around, I worked part-time at the local hardware store to help with expenses. Grandma insisted on contributing what she could from her pension, though I tried to refuse. "Education is the one thing nobody can take from you," she would say, pressing crumpled $20 bills into my hand for textbooks. I studied architectural engineering, inspired by the hours spent building elaborate structures with the wooden blocks she had saved from my father's childhood. Every Sunday during college, I would drive the 40 minutes back home for our traditional dinner. Sometimes I brought laundry. She always sent me back with enough leftovers to feed me for days. After graduation, I was fortunate to land a position at a respected firm in Minneapolis. I found an apartment just a 30-minute drive from Grandma's house to make sure I could visit regularly. As the years passed, I watched her gray hair turn white and her steady hands develop a slight tremor. In her early 70s, she was diagnosed with heart problems. The roles gradually reversed, and I became her caretaker. I installed handrails in her bathroom, drove her to doctor appointments, and made sure her prescriptions were filled. On weekends, I would mow her lawn, fix anything that needed repair, and stock her refrigerator. Our Sunday dinners continued, though now I was often the one cooking while she supervised from her favorite chair, sharing family recipes I carefully wrote down. Throughout all those years, my parents remained distant figures. They relocated permanently to London, with vacation homes in the south of France and Switzerland. They would call perhaps twice a year, conversations filled with their adventures and achievements rather than questions about my life or Grandma's health. They sent expensive but impersonal gifts at Christmas, items that showed how little they knew me. I stopped expecting anything more. Grandma never complained about their absence, but I knew it hurt her. "Your father was always restless," she once told me, while sorting through old photographs. But I never thought he would be too restless to know his own son. That was the closest she ever came to criticizing them directly. What I never realized during all those years of Sunday dinners and quiet evenings on her porch was that my grandmother, behind her frugal lifestyle and modest home, had been quietly building a substantial estate. She never once hinted at it, and I never would have guessed. The day I lost my grandmother started like many others. It was a crisp autumn morning, and I had stopped by before work to check her medication organizer and bring her fresh groceries. She seemed tired, but insisted she was fine. "Just the change in seasons, Burton," she said with her warm smile. "Go on to work. I am going to take it easy today." When I called during my lunch break, there was no answer. The nagging worry in my gut sent me racing to her house, where I found her peacefully sitting in her favorite chair, her worn copy of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice open on her lap. She looked almost as if she were napping, but I knew immediately she was gone. The paramedics confirmed what I already knew. Her heart had finally given out. The next few days passed in a blur of grief. I arranged a simple funeral service at the small Methodist church she had attended for over 50 years. I chose her favorite hymns and asked her longest-serving library colleague to deliver a eulogy. The church was filled with people whose lives she had touched, former students, neighbors, church friends, and members of her book club. I was sitting alone in the funeral home office, finalizing details when my phone rang with a number I barely recognized. It was my father. "Burton, we just heard about Mom," he said, his voice oddly formal. "Your mother and I are catching the next flight from London. We should arrive tomorrow morning." I was stunned into silence. They had not visited in over 5 years, despite my many invitations and updates about Grandma's declining health. "Burton, are you there?" my father pressed. "Yes, I finally managed. The service is the day after tomorrow." "I did not think you would come." "Of course we would come," he replied, sounding almost offended. "She was family. We need to be there for all the arrangements." Something in his tone struck me as odd, but I was too exhausted and grief-stricken to analyze it. True to their word, my parents arrived the next day, dressed impeccably as always. My mother embraced me briefly, her expensive perfume overwhelming. "Oh, darling, what a terrible time for you," she said, pulling back to examine me. "You look tired. Have you been sleeping?" Before I could respond, my father was already asking questions about the estate matters and whether I had been in touch with Grandma's attorney. I explained that as far as I knew, Grandma had a simple will that her longtime attorney, William Patterson, would be handling after the funeral. Throughout the service, I noticed my parents spent more time networking with distant relatives than actually mourning. My mother kept patting her eyes with a tissue, but I never saw actual tears. My father spent considerable time questioning Grandma's older sister, Aunt Sophia, about family assets under the guise of reminiscing. After the service, as people gathered at Grandma's house for the reception, I overheard my parents in the kitchen. "The house alone must be worth at least $300,000, my father was saying. "And if she was as careful with money as Mom always was, there could be substantial savings." "Do you think she had investments?" my mother asked. "Your father always said she was smarter with money than people realized." "We will find out soon enough," my father replied. "As her only child, naturally, everything will come to me. It is family money, after all." I slipped away before they noticed me, my stomach churning with disbelief. They had barely been present in Grandma's life for decades, yet here they were tallying her worth before her funeral reception had even ended. That evening, without asking, they announced they would stay at Grandma's house to help sort through things. I had been staying there myself since her passing, unable to bear the thought of the house sitting empty. I reluctantly agreed, not having the energy to argue. The next morning I found them going through Grandma's desk drawers and filing cabinet. Papers were spread across her normally immaculate dining room table. "What are you doing?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Just trying to get a handle on Mom's affairs," my father said casually. Someone needs to take charge of the situation. I thought we would wait for the meeting with Mr. Patterson, I said. That seems like the respectful thing to do. Burton, darling, my mother interjected, your father knows about these matters. We are just trying to make things easier for everyone. The tension was broken by a phone call from Mr. W.W. Patterson himself, scheduling the will reading for the following week. When I mentioned that my parents were in town, he asked if they would be attending as well. I confirmed they would, noticing how my father's expression brightened at the prospect. Excellent, my father said, after I hung up. Then we can get everything sorted properly and move forward. Move forward with what exactly, I asked. My father exchanged a look with my mother before answering. Well, there will be decisions to make about the house possessions, any accounts, all of that. Your mother and I have some ideas already. Over the next few days, their behavior grew increasingly presumptuous. They began discussing renovations to update Grandma's house before selling it. They picked through her belongings, my mother claiming certain jewelry pieces as family heirlooms that should return to her. My father spent hours in Grandma's home office, searching through papers and making phone calls. One afternoon, I found him at her computer, attempting to access her email account. Dad, stop, I said firmly. This is not appropriate. Burton, do not be naive, he replied without looking up. We need to check for any online accounts, subscriptions, that sort of thing. It is standard procedure when someone passes. Then let Mr. Patterson handle it, I insisted. That is his job. As her son, I have every right, he began. As her son, who visited maybe twice in the last decade, the words escaped before I could stop them. His face hardened. That is unfair. We had our own lives to lead. Mom understood that. I walked out of the room before saying something I might regret, wondering how I would survive until the will reading. The offices of Patterson Legal Services occupied the second floor of a well-maintained brick building in downtown Rochester. Mr. Patterson had served the community for over 30 years, and his wood-paneled office reflected that established history. Family photos and law credentials lined the walls, and the large conference table gleamed under soft lighting. My parents arrived impeccably dressed, my father in a tailored charcoal suit, and my mother in a conservative black dress with pearls. I had opted for a simple dark blue suit, the one I had worn to job interviews, as I rarely needed formal attire in my daily work. Aunt Sophia arrived shortly after us, her eyes still red-rimmed from crying. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "Your grandmother was so proud of you, Burton." My cousin Derek, who lived a few hours away in Chicago, completed our small group. The most surprising presence was Judge Martha Simmons, a distinguished-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes. Mr. Patterson explained that my grandmother had specifically requested a judge be present for the reading to ensure everything proceeded properly. Quite unusual, my father commented with a forced chuckle. Mom always did like to do things by the book. Mrs. Burton was very specific in her instructions, Mr. Patterson replied without elaboration. We all took our seats around the conference table. My parents positioned themselves directly across from Mr. Patterson, while I sat beside Aunt Sophia, finding comfort in her familiar presence. Mr. Patterson adjusted his reading glasses and began with the formal introduction to the will. My father leaned forward intently, while my mother maintained a composed expression that occasionally slipped into impatience. I, Elaine Margaret Burton, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, Mr. Patterson read. I revoke all prior wills and codicils. He proceeded through standard legal language about debts and funeral expenses before reaching the first substantive provision. Regarding my primary residence at 1472 Willow Creek Lane, Rochester, Minnesota, along with all contents, furnishings, and personal effects contained therein, my mother subtly reached for my father's hand under the table. And regarding all financial assets, including, but not limited to, bank accounts, investment portfolios, retirement accounts, insurance policies, and all other assets of any kind. My father's posture straightened, a slight smile forming at the corner of his mouth. The total value of these assets amounting to approximately $3,750,000. There was an audible gasp from everyone at the table. My cousin Derek's eyes widened in shock. Aunt Sophia turned to me with surprise written across her face. But my parents' reactions were most telling. My father's expression transformed into undisguised triumph, while my mother brought a hand to her mouth in delight. $3.75 million, my father repeated, already pulling out his phone. That is remarkable. Mom never indicated she had accumulated such wealth. Thomas, this changes everything, my mother whispered, not quite quietly enough. We can finally get that beach house in Malibu we have been considering. And we should look at those investment opportunities in Singapore, my father added. I have been researching several options that would be perfect with this kind of capital. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat loudly. If I may continue. Judge Simmons fixed my parents with a stern look. Please allow Mr. Patterson to finish reading the will without interruption. My parents nodded, though they continued exchanging excited glances. My stomach tightened with a mixture of disbelief at the amount and disgust at their behavior. Mr. Patterson adjusted his glasses and continued reading. I hereby bequeath all of the aforementioned assets in their entirety to my grandson, Burton James Walker. The room fell silent. My father's phone slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. What did you say? He demanded. Perhaps I should read that section again, Mr. Patterson said calmly. Mrs. Burton leaves her entire estate, the house, all financial assets, and personal belongings, to her grandson, Burton James Walker. There are no other beneficiaries named in the will. My mother turned to my father, her face draining of color. There must be some mistake. She cannot have left everything to Burton. Mr. Patterson removed a sealed envelope from the file. Mrs. Burton also left a personal letter to be read at this time. He handed the envelope to me. With shaking hands, I broke the seal and unfolded the pages, immediately recognizing Grandma's neat handwriting. Would you like me to read it, Mr. Patterson offered. I shook my head and began reading aloud, my voice unsteady at first, but growing stronger with each word. My dearest Burton, if this letter is being read, then I have left this world, hopefully having lived a life that made some difference. I want you to know that the greatest joy of my life was raising you. When your parents left you with me, they gave me an unintended gift, the opportunity to know and love an extraordinary person. I have watched you grow into a man of integrity, kindness, and responsibility, qualities that make me prouder than you could ever know. You sacrificed your own time and comfort to care for me in my final years, never complaining, always showing up when I needed you. I know this inheritance may come as a shock. I invested wisely over the years, living simply while my savings grew. I never spoke of it because money changes people, something I observed firsthand with your parents. Thomas and Julia chose a different path. They prioritized their ambitions over family, including you. While I never stopped loving my son, I cannot reward the choices he made. Family is about who shows up, Burton, and you showed up every single day. Use this inheritance wisely. Help others. Create the life that brings you joy. Know that wherever I am proud of the man you have become, not because of any achievement or success, but because of your heart. All my love always, Grandma. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Aunt Sophia squeezed my hand, her own eyes wet with emotion. The silence was shattered by my father's voice. This is outrageous. I demand to see that letter. Before anyone could respond, he continued, his face flushed with anger. This is clearly a case of undue influence. My son has manipulated my mother in her vulnerable state to secure her fortune for himself. That is absolutely not true, I protested, but my father was already in full attack mode. My mother was elderly and impressionable. He insisted directing his comments to Judge Simmons. Burton had access to her daily. He isolated her from her actual family and convinced her to change her will in his favor. My mother joined in tears, suddenly appearing on cue. It is just so unfair to the family. Thomas is her only child. That money should remain in the direct family line. Judge Simmons, who had been observing silently, finally spoke. Mr. and Mrs. Burton, your concerns have been anticipated. She nodded to Mr. Patterson, who removed another document from the file. Mrs. Burton executed an addendum to her will 6 months ago, Mr. Patterson explained. She specifically addressed the possibility of challenges to her wishes. He began reading from the document. I anticipate that my son Thomas and his wife Julia may contest this will. To address any claims of undue influence, I have documented the following. My son and his wife have visited me only 8 times in the past 20 years, with the longest gap being 6 years between visits. I have maintained a record of all communications, including phone calls, which average less than 4 per year. During my hospitalization in 2018, they did not visit despite being informed of my condition. In contrast, my grandson Burton has provided consistent care, companionship, and support throughout my later years. Additionally, I have been evaluated by Dr. Richard Langston, geriatric specialist, who has certified my mental competence as of the date of this will's execution. His full assessment is attached as Appendix A. I make this decision of sound mind and clear intention. It reflects my wishes to reward the family bonds that are built through presence, care, and love, not merely through blood relation. My father's face had grown increasingly red as Mr. Patterson read. This is ridiculous. A mother cannot disinherit her only child. Actually, Mr. Burton, Judge Simmons interjected, in the state of Minnesota, as in most states, a person of sound mind has complete testamentary freedom to dispose of their assets as they see fit, with the exception of spousal rights, which do not apply here. Your mother was under no legal obligation to leave you anything. Burton must have put these ideas in her head, my mother insisted. He has been plotting this for years. Aunt Sophia, who had remained quiet until now, straightened in her chair. That is absolute nonsense, Julia. I visited my sister every month for the past 15 years. I saw firsthand how Burton cared for her. He installed safety rails in her bathroom. He drove her to every doctor appointment. He called her every single day when he could not be there in person. She turned to face my parents directly. Where were you when Elaine had heart surgery 3 years ago? Burton slept in that uncomfortable hospital chair for 4 nights straight. Where were you when she needed her medication changed every 6 hours after her fall? Burton rearranged his entire work schedule to be there. My mother looked away, unable to meet Aunt Sophia's steady gaze. Judge Simmons cleared her throat. Having reviewed all documentation prior to this meeting, I can state that this will appears legally sound in all respects. Mrs. Burton took extraordinary measures to ensure her wishes were clear and her competence was established. Unless there is compelling evidence to the contrary, I see no grounds for a successful challenge. My father stood abruptly. This is not over. I will be contacting my attorneys immediately. You are welcome to pursue legal action, Judge Simmons replied calmly. However, I strongly advise you to consider the strength of the documentation Mrs. Burton has provided. Contested will cases can be lengthy, expensive, and rarely successful in circumstances like these. My father grabbed his coat. Come, Julia, we are leaving. My mother stood giving me one last accusatory glance before following him out the door. As they left, I sat stunned, trying to process everything that had just happened. Not only had my grandmother left me a fortune I never knew existed, but she had also foreseen and prepared for my parents' reaction with remarkable clarity. Mr. Patterson gathered his papers. Burton, when you are ready, We can discuss the next steps in administering the estate. There is no rush. Judge Simmons approached me before leaving. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. She spoke very highly of you when we met to prepare these documents. It was important to her that her wishes be respected. I nodded, still overwhelmed. Thank you for being here today. After everyone else had left, Aunt Sophia remained with me in the conference room. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing, Burton. She was always sharper than people gave her credit for. I never expected any of this, I said honestly. I had no idea she had that kind of money. She was smart with her investments, Aunt Sophia explained, and she wanted to make sure you were taken care of. She knew what would happen when Thomas found out. As we walked out together, I realized this was just the beginning of what promised to be a difficult battle with my parents. But somehow, knowing Grandma had anticipated everything made me feel she was still watching over me, guiding me, even now. True to their word, my parents filed a lawsuit challenging Grandma's will within a week. They hired an aggressive attorney from Minneapolis who specialized in estate litigation. The legal documents arrived at my door with formal language claiming undue influence, diminished capacity, and breach of fiduciary relationship, legal terms that painted me as a manipulative villain who had taken advantage of an elderly woman. Reading those accusations was one of the hardest moments in the aftermath of Grandma's death. The parents who had abandoned me were now publicly claiming I had manipulated the woman who had lovingly raised me. The injustice of it burned deep. Mr. Patterson assured me the case had little merit. Your grandmother created an ironclad will, he explained, during one of our meetings. The documentation she assembled is extraordinary. Medical evaluations, communication records, witness statements. She even videotaped her declaration of intent with Judge Simmons present. Despite these reassurances, the months that followed were filled with anxiety and stress. My parents' attorney sent aggressive letters, scheduled depositions, and demanded access to years of financial and medical records. Each interaction felt like another attack on my relationship with Grandma. During this difficult period, my friends became my lifeline. My college roommate Jordan insisted on weekly dinners to make sure I was eating properly. My colleague Rachel, who had lost her own grandmother, recently checked in daily with texts and calls. My boss at the architectural firm granted me flexible hours to attend legal meetings. I also found unexpected support from Grandma's friends. Her book club members dropped off home-cooked meals. Her former colleagues from the library sent cards with encouraging notes. Aunt Sophia called every Sunday, continuing the tradition of Sunday check-ins that Grandma had established. 6 months after that fateful will reading, we finally had our day in court. The county courthouse was an imposing structure of red brick and white columns, its formality adding to my nervousness. My parents arrived with their attorney, both of them avoiding eye contact with me in the hallway before proceedings began. Inside the courtroom, my father's attorney presented their case, first spinning a narrative of a devoted son who had maintained a close relationship with his mother despite geographical distance. He described me as an opportunistic grandson who had isolated my grandmother from her family and exerted psychological pressure during her vulnerable final years. Each false claim felt like a physical blow. I watched my parents nod in agreement with these lies, supporting a completely fabricated version of our family history. When it was our turn, Mr. Patterson methodically dismantled their narrative. He presented Grandma's detailed records of my parents' limited contact over 20 years. He called Aunt Sophia to testify about her observations of our family dynamics. Most powerfully, he played the video Grandma had recorded, where she clearly stated her reasons for her estate decisions and affirmed she was under no pressure from anyone. I am making these decisions freely, and of my own accord, Grandma's voice rang out in the courtroom. My grandson Burton has been my joy and support for most of his life. He deserves not only whatever financial security I can provide, but also recognition of the love and care he has shown me. My son Thomas chose a different path, and I have accepted that choice. But choices have consequences. Seeing her again, even on video, brought tears to my eyes. Her characteristic straightforwardness and clarity were evident in every word. The judge, not Martha Simmons this time, but a thoughtful older man named Judge Harold Reynolds, listened carefully to both sides before rendering his decision. Having reviewed all evidence presented, I find no indication of undue influence or diminished capacity in this case, he stated firmly. Elaine Burton's wishes were clear, consistent, and well documented. Her estate plan reflected her values and recognized the relationships that provided actual support and care during her lifetime. He looked directly at my parents as he continued. The court will not substitute its judgment for that of the testator when she was clearly of sound mind. The will is valid as written, and the petition to invalidate it is dismissed. As a final blow, he added. Furthermore, given the substantial evidence that was available to the plaintiffs before filing this action, the court finds this challenge was without probable cause. The defendant's legal fees will therefore be paid from the plaintiff's portion of the estate, except in this case, as the plaintiffs were not beneficiaries, they will be personally responsible for those costs. My parents' attorney immediately began whispering urgently to them, but the judge had already moved on to the next case. Outside the courtroom, my father approached me for the first time in months. "This is not what Mom would have wanted," he said, his voice tight with anger. "She would never have intended to create this kind of division in the family." I took a deep breath before responding. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. She always did. "You have no idea what she would have wanted," my mother interjected. "You manipulated her when she was vulnerable and elderly." Something in me finally snapped after months of restraint. I knew what brand of tea she preferred. I knew which chair hurt her back and which one was comfortable. I knew she turned the heat up at night because her hands got cold. I knew she kept her medications in the kitchen instead of the bathroom because the bathroom was too humid. I stepped closer to them. I knew her because I was there, every day, for years. Where were you when she needed someone to hold her hand during chemotherapy? Where were you when she was afraid she might never leave the hospital? You know nothing about who she became in the 20 years you chose to be absent. My father's face flushed dark red. We had our own lives to lead. She understood that. Yes, she did understand, I agreed. She understood exactly who showed up and who did not, and her will reflected that understanding perfectly. My mother grabbed my father's arm. "Come on, Thomas. There is nothing more to say here." As they walked away, my father turned back one last time. "You will regret this, Burton. Family should stick together." I could not agree more. I called after him. Grandma was my family. She stuck with me my entire life. They did not look back again. In the year that followed, I slowly adjusted to my new financial reality while continuing to grieve Grandma's loss. The first decision was easy. I would keep her house as my home. I had the plumbing and electrical systems updated and added solar panels, something Grandma had always been interested in, but otherwise kept the home, much as she had maintained it. I established a scholarship at the local community college in Elaine Burton's name for students pursuing library science or education. The annual award would cover full tuition and books for 2 students, a fitting tribute to her passion for learning. While organizing her bedroom closet, I discovered a small journal labeled "Places I Would Like to See Someday." Inside were carefully clipped magazine photos of the Grand Canyon Yellowstone National Park, the Maine coastline, and other destinations she had never visited. I decided to fulfill this unspoken bucket list, taking a small portion of her ashes to each location. The healing process was not linear. Some days I would find myself standing in her garden, overwhelmed with memory and loss. Other days brought smiles as I discovered notes she had tucked into books or recipes annotated with her characteristic humor. I joined a support group for people dealing with family estrangement, which helped me process the complicated feelings about my parents. Though they had moved back to London after the court case occasionally, their existence would intrude through mutual acquaintances or holiday reminders. The group taught me that families come in many forms and that sometimes the healthiest choice is to accept the reality of broken relationships rather than trying to force connections that bring only pain. 1 year after Grandma's passing, I visited her grave with a bouquet of her favorite daisies. The simple headstone read, "Elaine Margaret Burton, beloved mother, grandmother, and friend." I had added, "Teacher of life's most important lessons," at the bottom. Sitting beside her grave on a cool autumn day, much like the one when she died, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive during the tumultuous year of legal battles and grief. "I miss you every day, Grandma," I said aloud, "but I am trying to live by what you taught me. Family really is about who shows up." I realize now what a profound gift my grandmother gave me. Not just the financial security of her inheritance, but the example of a life lived with integrity, kindness, and purpose. She showed me that family is created through consistent love and presence, not merely through genetic connection. The money has provided opportunities and security, but her true legacy is in the values she instilled. I am working with a financial advisor to manage the inheritance responsibly, focusing on sustainable investments and charitable giving that would make her proud. As I continue forward building my own chosen family of loyal friends and meaningful connections, I carry her wisdom with me. Sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we are born into. And sometimes justice comes in the form of a carefully planned will and a judge who ensures the right people are recognized for showing up when it matters most. Have you ever had to stand up to entitled family members? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this video helped you feel less alone in your family struggles, please hit like and subscribe to see more stories about standing up for what is right. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that family is about who shows up. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, we do not choose our blood relatives, but we can choose who we consider family.